Welcome again to another episode of the 1% in Recovery podcast. Today's a treat. We're going to keep it in Texas. It's going to be Houston, Dallas conversation. But let's always remember, you got to laugh every day. Got to work hard in recovery, work hard in your relationships, work hard in your business or job or in school. And you've got to love unconditionally. Just put more love out there and just let more love return. Like we always say, your EQ is your IQ. You cannot outthink an emotional issue, and recovery is beautiful. The one thing we do keep encouraging people to do is to join the Facebook group Recovery Freedom Circle. It's a community that everybody can participate, talk about recovery, talk about the steps. Maybe you have a question about recovery or the steps, or something that you just want to share about your own life. Maybe you have some goal or dream, or maybe you found a motivational quote, just something there to uplift. That's what this whole Life is Wonderful, the 1% in Recovery. We're just trying to shine the light on how beautiful life can be in recovery. Now, let's just jump into this week's episode. Elaine, how is Dallas? How are you doing? How are you
Hi,
feeling today?
Hugo. I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Dallas is, it's not super hot yet, but I know that's where we're headed. But
Exactly.
yeah, you know what? I went for a walk yesterday, and I felt so grateful that it's not 100 million degrees yet, and it was like 70, and it was beautiful. And that's something I love to move my body. I'm so grateful to be healthy. I love working out. To me, it's one of the most fun parts of being sober is getting your health back.
Correct. Total health. Well, I always try to talk about recovery isn't just about stopping the drinking or whatever other addictions you have. It's about total health.
It
And yeah,
is.
June is that funny month in Texas. Because
Right.
people who
It's
come
not
into
bad
Texas
yet.
go, it is so hot. I go, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Yeah.
Wait for July and August. This is just like a cooker. We're kind of like searing you.
Right.
All right,
That's why I
now
peeked
keep going.
out and I was like, oh my God, it's so nice. I have to go outside right now.
Exactly. You learn. That's when you start realizing, hey, in recovery, you can get up at 5:36 in the morning so you get your workout before 8 a.m.,
Which you
before the
have to
heat.
do. Yeah.
Yet
That's
you
so true.
do. All right, let's jump into this week's episode. Tell the audience one thing you love.
Well, I love as I mentioned earlier, I love working out. I also love trying little hole in the wall places that have good food. Like it's fun to go to
Mhm.
nice fancy places, but I love those hole in the wall places where you can find like the best tacos or the best brisket or the best whatever. That to me is really fun discovering. I'm a bit of a foodie, and so to me that's one of my fun hobbies.
Yeah, I hear you. So am I. I love finding those little tidbits, those little, whether it's something you may see on Instagram or TikTok, someone's posting, you go, "Ooh, I got to try that," or it's just something else. All right. But let's just jump in. I always like to just be straight to the point. Let's jump into the questions. What does peace and serenity mean to you?
Such a great question. I think for me, it means that I can be centered and grounded, even if there's chaos around. And I think it means that I can still get excited about things, but not get totally swept away. I'm a I'm a pretty passionate person, and in the past, I would just get swept away by emotions or opportunities. And so to me, when I'm grounded and I'm working my program and I'm meditating and working out and doing my spiritual practices, that helps me really stay um grounded. And that to me is all about peace and serenity, no matter what's happening outside.
Yeah, that is. I mean, we each got to find our own level of peace. I mean, that's why we always say the serenity prayer. To
Right.
me is like if you can't get that one peace when you walk in, that addiction means that your life has doesn't have any peace, doesn't have any serenity. And we got to remind ourselves on, okay, control what you can, but also understand what else brings us peace, what brings us joy.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, let's jump into question two. Now, this is a big one. Just so the audience knows, this is a big one for both Elaine and I. We had major loss here in February of this year. I lost my mother. She passed away. Elaine lost her dad. So this question is about grief. Now, and grief can obviously be deal with a major loss. How do we confront and accept grief? And I think the most important thing, how do we allow ourselves to stay in grief so we can process it? They always talk about, originally there was the 5 stages of grief, then they kind of expanded it to more. But in the end, we still got to process the feeling, the grief. And so tell us how you're dealing with grief this year, as well as, because I just want some people to know when I say grief, we're not only talking about death, we're talking about the ending of a major love relationship, maybe the end of a long career, as well as some other major thing like that has happened, maybe that you just got to kind of go through. So
Yeah.
talk to us about grief.
Well, it's interesting, Hugo, because I lived on the East Coast for 25 years, and I started coming back to Dallas in on May 2022. And it's one thing to come visit, it's a whole nother thing to live there. And I was all of a sudden I realized there was all these things I had not grieved that had happened when I was 19. And my sister was like, "Are you going to be okay?" And I just had like a week where I just was crying and crying and crying. And it's not fun, but it's also very cathartic to cry and to allow
Correct.
yourself to cry. And I'm so grateful that I realized, oh, I never grieved. There was a series of things that happened when I was a freshman, and I don't need to go into the details, but it's some pretty heavy stuff. And I had made the connections that I had never given myself time to grieve all the things that had happened. One was pretty catastrophic. So then leading to just losing my father, I was grieving before he died just because I never really got to have him growing up. And so getting to help be his caretaker the past 3 years was really healing, but also it was really sad. So I was in this whole like sort of paradox of like grateful to be with him now. And sometimes it was really sad because I so desperately needed him growing up, and he just wasn't capable or available for lots of reasons. And so and allowing myself to have all of the feelings. And I've learned to go, I'm in therapy, but I go to a lot of meetings and being able to go and just cry. And then, for example, I just came back I was away for 2 weeks. I did a women in podcasting cruise, and then I did a retreat, and I knew it was going to be like awesome work, but also very intense work. And then I was flying back into Love Field, where I used to go fly in to visit my dad when I was a little girl, but we also used to go into the ice skating rink. There used to be an ice skating rink in Love Field. And I just knew, okay, Elaine, do not schedule anything else after you fly in. And sure enough, the minute I landed, I just started crying. I went and got my suitcase, crying. I'm taking a breath, went to get some water, crying. I asked the poor guy, like, how do I get to the Uber place? My dad. And he probably thought I was crazy. And then I just got in the car and I was crying. Like, I just knew, like, it's going to be the first time I come back to left field that my dad won't have been able to pick me up. He didn't always pick me up, but and just like knowing, okay, I'm probably going to be sad, tired, emotionally exhausted, and to give myself a couple of days. And I gave myself the next day after coming back of just like meditating and crying and praying and go to meetings, and I didn't think I was capable of that. And I think it was a lot of things. It wasn't just about my dad, but just processing the whole experience with the retreat and my cousin and all the things. And so, it's not something I love doing. I don't like feeling sad, but I also know it's part of the process. And I know that it's good for me to do it. And, but it's been a really challenging time and it still hits me. It's only been a few months. And, but I'm so grateful I'm sober because if I wasn't sober, I would be squishing all of this down. I'd probably already be dead. But if I wasn't sober, I would just be pushing all of this down with God knows what, food, men, work, whatever. And so the gift of sobriety is being able to feel the feelings and lean into it and surrender to it.
Yeah, and
So
then
that's
like you said, so one thing that I did not add in, Elaine's got 24 years and 10 months. Come August, she'd hit the big 25.
oh my
I
god.
just celebrated 28. But I do understand that, we've had a lot of time. Not for me, it was not drinking and gambling. For you, is not drinking, that we could spend that time not only with our parents, but any other person that we loved. And it hasn't been just, it almost would feel like something would have been robbed if they had died, and it was only been like 3 or 4 years, even though I would have probably already had done like make amends or, been able to spend some holidays or quality times and, really be in the moment, just having just multiple years,
Yeah.
just be able to kind of say that I think is part of the grief, to just know that we've also been able granted the gift of life, and just to be
Yep.
really present. And like you said, is you're going to have those feelings of sadness, of being tired, but also those fond memories of the ice rink, the things that, and so like one thing that we're doing differently, so it was just my brother and I, and he had two daughters. And so the four of us are kind of either through text or, different ways to get together to try to honor my mom, as well as
Right.
just to be there in our own grief, because everybody has their own, within our families, we have our own grief journeys,
Right.
and we have to kind of just let, what do I need? Like I went out to California to get, a mud bath. I had to get that healing volcanic mud on me within 30 days. I wanted to do something. I just had to get out of Houston.
Right.
It's like sometimes people don't understand this. I just had to just leave town
Yeah. No, there's
and do
something so
something for me.
right. There's something so great to me about leaving your environment and sometimes just stepping out of that, you can have breakthroughs or see things that you can't see when you're in your daily thing, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, and I like how you just came back from a retreat. I'm going into a gambler's retreat here in about 10 days, but here in
Oh, cool.
Houston. But I highly encourage people, you're in recovery, go to retreats. It's good to unplug, to just be at some type of retreat center. Or you said
It's
you may have
so
been on,
good.
could be on a boat. Just have at least a weekend where you can just kind of like focus on what you're thinking, feeling, and just being around other people in recovery. That is just
It's
like
so
so
great.
priceless that you can't get within just going to a meeting for an hour.
Yes, there's something so special about fellowship and I know for me, so many times I was like trying to make up for lost time and working, 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 and I would go to the meetings, but then I would run and I didn't immerse myself in the fellowship. And when I finally slowed down, Hugo, my everything shifted. It was such a gift. It was such a gift to have more time and to be able to connect on deeper levels with other sober people. So I highly recommend doing some fellowship and even if it's just going to dinner or going for coffee or whatever after a meeting,
Right.
that can really be life-changing.
Oh, I can. And as we enter into question three, you did bring up, because I also said, you have to grieve our addictions. We got to grieve our old life. But like
Yep.
you kind of mentioned, there's also, sometimes we don't want, I think what holds us back sometimes, we don't want to confront and grieve, whether it was that sexual incident, whether it was some financial blunder where we lost a lot of money. Because a lot of times I always say, things always seem to come around back around love, sex, and money. It's always seems about those seems to like hit us upside the head. Where we wonder why we're crying, like you said, but crying on the inside. But we need, like you said, cry on the outside to get through it. Because crying, if you can cry and laugh, that means you're doing well.
I love it. I always say if I'm nauseous, sweating, or crying, for me, I know that means I'm processing.
Right,
And that's just, from doing a ton of other work. And I was just going to add on to what you said, Hugo, is I love the 12-step world, and I'm a big fan of like outside help, whatever you need, whatever you need to help yourself stay sober emotionally. And for me, that means I work out daily, I meditate daily, I need to be doing some kind of spiritual reading, even if I don't get to a meeting every day. I get to 4 minimum a week. And, that just is what works for me.
right,
And I've been traveling in Europe where I couldn't get to meetings, but I listened to podcasts, or I listened to books, or I did my Zoom
right.
meetings with my girls. So there's so many cool ways that we have, so many great tools that we didn't have when I first came in the program, right?
Right. That was actually one of the great thing about COVID was the all the onslaught of online meetings, because now
Right.
you can go to. I love going to meetings outside of town. But let's jump into question three. We kind of
Sure.
touched upon it. So just so everybody knows, Elaine and I met at Podfest, which is the largest podcasting conference held every year in January in Orlando, Florida. We met and we kind of talked. And I always find it, there's always a way you can hear someone talk and you feel like that person's in recovery. There's something else kind of going on. Let me hear a little more about their stories. It's just the way we talk or the way we move. Uh, or they kind of obviously might, when I introduce myself, oh, what's your podcast? 1% in recovery. And then people kind of go, oh, okay, I think
Of
I kind of get
course.
what
Right.
you're about. But let's talk. You talked about fellowship, and we're talking about community. But besides fellowship, how important is community in recovery?
Oh my gosh. It's everything. And if you had told me this, I don't know, 8 years ago, I would have been so mad. Um, one of the things they say about the disease, it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And I love stories. I love stories. I teach storytelling. I'm always on a million podcasts. I have a podcast. I have clients, whatever. And I didn't realize this, Hugo, but when I was on my Women in Podcasting cruise, one of the women said, I'm a lone wolf. And it like pierced me. Sometimes people say something and you're like, whoa. And I realized that I do this thing like after my meeting, but like if I'm getting ready for camera, getting dressed, I will put on a story. But then my brain goes into story mode, and I will totally check out with 2 other podcast episodes of a history thing or whatever instead of making phone calls. And I maybe it sounds very simple, but I realize like Elaine, you're isolating. You need to be making phone calls. You need to be checking on people in, sobriety, but also your clients, your prospects, your colleagues. And so to me, fellowship is so important because you can hear things that are meant for you. God talks to us through people. And sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing something that might not be great for us. And so, yeah, fellowship is everything. Who you hang out with is everything.
Right.
I just started dating again, and it's hilarious and terrifying. But it's I'm practicing discernment because my time and attention are so precious to me, and I really want to be careful about who, if I decide to hang out with somebody, because God, I used to not be discerning at all. And now, at 57, I'm way more picky, and I think that's good for me. So I don't know, that's kind of a long answer to the fellowship question, Hugo.
Yeah, and I think people have addressed. I've listened to some other podcast, when people aren't drinking and they talk about dating, and then trying to see, okay, does the other person drink, not drink? I'm always comfortable, whether it's business, whether it's love life, whether it's family, because my family always drank, so it was never going to be an issue. I had to learn how to live within a
Right.
drinking world. But yeah, it does add questions as well. How are you going to view dating, and how, because that will be a little more impactful. But yeah, I think the whole thing about kind of getting out there. And one last thing, we both did stand up at Podfest, which is one of those things that in the back of my head I was always like, oh, I want to do that. And those are the wonderful gifts of, kind of, to me, recovery, where you kind of just step out. You go more on faith. We have talent. Uh, it is going to be something new. You're not going to be some ecstatic, funny comedian where you're going to get laughs for 5 minutes. I think ours was 3 minutes.
It was short. Yep.
It was short, but I mean, that's probably better. It's like shorter, come up with a few things. But any last words you want to share about either recovery? You could something about, like we talked about, whether it was grief, whether it was community, whether it was peace, or just some other what they call,
Sure.
gem that you learned.
I would say, I've had lots of different mentors and sponsors, and I had a mentor who he was brilliant. He was just a brilliant guy, and he'd been in recovery, and he would tell me that, he meditated, and every once in a while, at least once a week, he would just let himself cry. And he said, you don't have to know why. It can just be an emotional release. And that was so like mind blowing for me, because if you're in a recovery, you're probably sensitive. So if you're conscious, awake, and aware, there's a lot happening, right? There's always a lot happening in the world. And I think we're even more aware of it now because of social media and the 24/7 cycle. And whether you're watching TV a lot or not, there's stuff coming at us constantly. And so I think having some kind of active practice or ritual where you can release emotion is so powerful. And when I was newly sober, I had done a leadership program with the Landmark Forum, with Landmark Education, prior to coming into AA. And one of the things they talked about was call your coach. If you're messed up, call your coach. If you're happy, call your coach. If you're sad, call your coach. If you're stressed out, call your coach. And in the past, whenever I gotten triggered, I would turn within, and that's when I would use and abuse, right? And so for the first time, I had learned this other behavior of reaching out for help. And in the past, I'd reached out, but I'd always been surrounded by my crazy family who was not healthy, or other people who are not healthy. And so for the first time, I had access to healthy, supportive people. And so that alone, to me, was one of the most amazing foundations of my program. And that's what I tell new people to do all the time. So if you're new or just coming back, one of the best ways to get sober and stay sober is to, who are the people you can reach out to and ask for help? Who are the people you can leave a message like, I'm having a rough day and I just need to blah, blah, blah. Like, get it out. Get it out. And stand up is a great way. I've been a stand up comedian since '05, and it's a great therapy, to go to open mic
It
and
is.
just blah. So I'm a big fan of expressing yourself, whether it's crying or screaming or yelling or whatever. It's a great way to help to get sober and stay sober.
Right.
So that's my
I'll finish with this. So in stand up, if you're successful, you're going to feel big smile on your face. You're going to be able to just go, man, I made the audience laugh. And if you bomb, like you said, you could just go home and cry, and
right.
everything will be okay.
I did a lot of that. My first class in stand up, I kept thinking they told me I was funny, but I'm not funny. I'm not funny on demand. And then when I did my showcase, I talked about my dysfunctional family, and everybody was dying laughing, and I had a light bulb moment of like, oh, I'm supposed to help
Oh.
people. So yeah, it's a journey. It's always a journey.
All right, with that, we are going to conclude this episode of the 1% in Recovery.